This is on the lower left, the first photograph, 1829, I think, 2829, on the SF4 Niepce. Yes, I think he said. This is at the original of this is at the Ransom Center, Humanities Center at the University of Texas. If you ever find yourself in Austin for SW, you can go for Southwest, South by Southwest, and have a free afternoon, you know, you're sober, you can go over there and look at it. What I want to talk about today, and I don't know if we're going to get through all of this, we'll get through what we get through, is why we're talking about the photograph, why it's so important to the history of information. I want to talk a bit about photography as a technology and the notion of a technology. This becomes now much more important as we come to the modern era, because technology is a more complicated notion. In particular, I want to talk about the way in which photography shaped the modern notion of truth and objectivity, which is crucial to the concept of information and lots of other things. Talk about some of the uses of photography that were connected to this as a way of fixing identities, as documenting the deviant. I'll explain what that means when we get to it. And then a bit about how we read photographs, because the photographs are highly culturally constructed in the sense that when we look at a photograph, we see it through a lens that's shaped by our own culture to a degree that we don't quite realize. We're not going to talk about photography as art, which is actually a topic that interests me a lot, but we just won't get to that. Or photography as a popular form, snapshots, and so on. Another fascinating topic. There's lots to say about photography. We have only this session. Where are we? We're in the 19th century and zeroing in on the information age, which in a certain sense you could say begins in the 19th century. That's certainly when people start to talk about information itself, as it were, I mean, the word itself, and in which they start to think about information in terms that anticipate the way we think about it. This on the upper left, I'll say that is on the lower left, Nadar, the French photographer, famous portrait photographer, but also made one of the first aerial views of Paris from a balloon. Henry, how many people heard of Henry Adams? I'm just curious. A few. He was a very interesting figure from the 19th century, the grandson of John Adams, the great-grandson of John Adams, the grandson of John Quincy Adams. His father, Charles Francis Adams, was the ambassador to Britain. So of that line, himself a historian, and in 1905 wrote an autobiography. That's a fascinating book, a kind of intellectual or cultural history from that point of view, from the point of view of Boston Brahmin, of the second half of the 19th century, political as well, which he wrote in the third person. He referred to himself as he in the book. And at one point in this book, he writes, only on looking back 50 years later at his own figure in 1854 and pondering on the needs of the 20th century, he wondered whether, on the whole, the boy of 1854 stood nearer to the thought of 1904 or to that of the year one. It seemed to him so much had happened in the previous 50 years that it was as if it was greater than everything that happened in the 2 centuries before that. Before the boy was 6 years old, that is 1844, he had seen four. He was born in 1838. He had seen 4 impossibilities made actual: the ocean steamer, the railway, the electric telegraph, and the daguerreotype. Now that's an interesting list. In particular, the 4th item on that list. Okay, the ocean steamer had obviously changed the world both commercially and militarily. Around the time that when Adams was 5 years old, it took the Great Republic was the last great clipper ship. It crossed the Atlantic in 13 days. Probably in 1844 would take 15 or 16 or 17 days by clipper ship to cross the Atlantic. There were some steamships, but they were actually slower at that point. By the time he was in 1905, the crossing was made in 5 or 6 days. One of these enormous steamships. A world of difference. The telegraph, Paul's already talked about, how it changed everything, again, commercially, militarily, politically, just in terms of personal relations. The railway, we haven't spoken about, but obviously also that. I mean, there was a rail system in place in 1844, but between then and the turn of the 20th century, you've got this vast network, particularly in the United States and in Western Europe, which made it possible to travel to ship goods and so on and so forth. The Golden Spike, people remember the year? 1869, the Golden Spike in Provo, Ogden, Utah, that united the Southern Pacific and maybe the Connecticut, California, and so on. Right. Well, they didn't make the NCAA's, I'm sure. So extraordinary changes in this period. And then the photograph, the daguerreotype. I mean, not that it isn't a big deal, but you don't see it as having had that kind of influence on the shape of modern society. The society of New York at the turn of the 20th century, it's a little bit later, that picture, like 1920, 1950, that society would have been immeasurably different if not for those inventions, and the elevator, and steel construction, and other things that made modern urban life possible. Without the daguerreotype, how much of a difference would it make without photography? It doesn't seem like it would look that different. And yet, Adams lists the photograph there, and he lists it because in a certain sense, it is as influential on the way people think about the world, and about information, and about communication, as any of these others are. This is a period, in a certain sense, in which the notion of information itself becomes a part of the everyday thought. What do we mean by information? Well, there are lots of ways to describe it. One is to say that information is, in a certain sense, autonomous. It exists independent of any knower, of anybody. It's stuff we pass around like a commodity. It's implicit in its context. It's just there. If I say how much medical, we spoke about this, how much medical information is there in the world, we think of the stuff sitting in all the books and servers and just out in the world. If I think of medical knowledge, all of a sudden I'm talking about people who know it. Doctors and nurses and researchers and so on and so forth. The information is just out there. And it's objective. The fact that we can pass information around from one to another of us implies that information has no point of view, that a piece of information has the same meaning to me as it does to you. Those two properties characterize the way people think about information, that we think about it automatically. They're really a 20th century, 19th century notion. The idea, for example, that a bit of information could be valid without knowing who produced it or when it was produced is a 19th century notion, one we have automatically. I remember it's actually relevant now. I remember some years ago I was giving a talk at Ohio State, and I arrived late at night on a flight and got into a rental car and was driving to the people who were hosting me. And I turned on the radio, and the voice came on and said, Richmond had just beaten Syracuse in the opening rounds of the NCAA. It's the first time at the number 16 seed being the number 1 seed, I think, in NCAA history. That's amazing. And I thought, wait a second. Why do I believe this? There's a voice coming over a radio. I don't know whose voice it is. I don't know what station it is. Not even my car, right? But nonetheless, if you asked me to bet $100 against 10 cents that was true, I'd take the bet. Because the mere fact of the mode of presentation, the fact of the way this assertion is coming at me, tells me implicitly that behind it is this whole apparatus of journalism and broadcasting and so on and so forth that's going to ensure that the score of that game comes over an anonymous radio somewhere accurately. That's the notion of information. It's experience that nobody in the 18th century ever had. If there's no way in the 18th century anybody could tell you that without your having to say, well, how do you know that? Who told you that? Where did you hear it? Who are you? The idea that just a bit of information could come in without any background and be valid was a 19th century idea. And photography had a lot to do with that. It gave us two things. It seemed to present the world as it is, the way it really is, without needing to know who produced it, without any human intervention, without any point of view implicit in it, as if nature itself was painting a picture. And it provided, and we'll talk about this, a model for talking about other kinds of representation for journalistic objectivity. For example, people are continually comparing it to the photograph. Photographic becomes a word that means truthful to the world without intervention. But at this point, let me stop because there is an issue that we're going to come up on again and again and again. When we talk about photography, we might be thinking in the broad sense of a lot of different things. Here are some of the ways in which photography is used in modern life. I mean, you got the camera up top of the traffic lights. Now in San Francisco, we got it. It's changed my life a lot. You've got celebrity photography and news photography. You have bank photographs and photographs in convenience store security photographs, micro photographs, postcard photographs, souvenir photographs, commemorative photographs of the class of 1921, driver's license photographs, wanted posters, telescopes, photo finishes, and so on. I mean, obviously, you could go on and on multiplying this. This technology has an enormously wide range of applications. Moreover, the things we think of as photography, as opposed to other means of capturing and transmitting images, that distinction is not one that's implicit in the technology itself. So there are other kinds of things that we may or may not think of as photography, but really involve the same kind of thing. X-rays, for example, are X-rays photography or not? Is television photography or not? Well, I mean, you're capturing an image, and why is that photography? Or the movies. Now, they're moving images, and people do talk about motion picture photography. But the point is that the definition of a technology like photography isn't implicit in the technology itself. It's a way we chop up the world among the various possibilities and group certain applications, certain techniques, certain inventions together and make others distinct. Here's a way of thinking about that. Photography shaped by, and this is not a conventional way, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this, but this is the way I like to think of it. Photography shaped by a number of distinct inventions. We'll come back to this in a moment, but it is, as Paul said, one of these technologies that's invented by committee. There's pre-photography, I'll talk about in a moment. There are people like Nies, Daguerre, Talbot, Archer, and so on, these early inventors of photography. There are the new techniques, collodion and dry plate, whatever. And then there are later techniques like photolithography, and which make it possible to reproduce photographs in great numbers for newspapers and so on. Color photography, phototelegraphy makes it possible. So there are all these different techniques or inventions that contribute to this technology, let's say, called photography, along with a number of institutions and social forms and skills and so forth that constitute this technology of photography. And the technology itself is applied in a number of different ways. It's applied for official records like your driver's license. It's applied in photojournalism on the front page of the newspaper, art photography, consumer photography, snapshots, visiting cards, which I think were in the, maybe, I can't remember if they were in a piece of New Hall that you read. Everybody had a little copy of the in the 19th century, often with a picture on it you gave to people. The scientific use of photography, we talk microphotography, telescopy, and then surveillance and military photography and forensic photography used for and all these different applications of photography, each of which then may have further applications in various media. You could talk about journalism, photojournalism in newspapers and magazines, on television, on the internet now, and so forth. The question of whether this is still photography, I guess so, if I ship it and so on and so forth. But it isn't as if photography is defined by the set of material techniques it uses, but rather it's a cluster of ways, all involving in some sense capturing and often transmitting an image that constitutes socially a unity. We could make the same, we're going to tell the same story about the other examples we talk about here. The internet is just horribly complicated from this point. I don't even know if I can make a chart like this. But if you think about broadcasting, for example, there were a number of different contributions. We'll talk about this later. There were a number of different contributions from Marconi and Kessler and Fessenden and other inventors of the late 19th, early 20th century. There were and FM. They create radio and later television. That is in turn applied in various ways. There's point-to-point transmission. Originally, radio was thought of as above all a ship-to-shore, a means of ship-to-shore communication, point-to-point communication, walkie-talkie. Broadcast, of course, which gives rise to applications in commercial radio and shortwave transmission advisories. When you're approaching the airport, I don't have San Francisco. You're approaching the airport, you tune to 104, somewhere low on the dial, and it tells you how much traffic there is, and so on, and etc. Remote control. Radio, I think most of what we do with radio now is probably remote control as much as anything else, your garage door and so on. So this is the pattern we're going to be seeing over and over and over again in the technologies we talk about from here on in. So now did I duplicate these slides? I guess I did. Well, you get two educations for one. So photography is a dream for a long time. Adam's remark suggests that. And in fact, you could say it begins with what's called the camera obscura, a device involving a mirror that enables one, and often a lens, that enables one to project an image of something outside on the wall or on a flat surface. Have anybody here been to the Cliff House, Ocean Beach? How many? You can get out there. It's not the most interesting thing to do at Ocean Beach, but it's this camera obscura. You can walk in there and see projected on the wall the cliff and the rocks and so on and so forth. There used to be one at Greenwich, which Paul has spoke about last time. I didn't wear my Greenwich socks that day. But there used to be one at Greenwich back as early as the 18th century, and Joseph Addison, the essayist, went there and said it was the prettiest landscape I ever saw. It was when I'm drawing the walls of a dark room and so on and so forth. But it was something people went to see, quite remarkable. There was, of course, you could project it, but there was no way to capture it. Once the sun went down, it went away. There was no way to stop it. And that arose. And there was also the camera lucida was a similar device that enabled you to project with a half silver glass, project an image onto a surface, which you could then use for drawing and rendering an image. It was kind of like a way of cheating. David Hockney, people know David Hockney, the painter, British painter, wrote a book called Secret Knowledge, and he said that Van Eyck and these the great Flemish painters of the 15th century must have used the camera lucida and other devices in their painting. They must have been cheating. And he did it via the analysis of certain things like that, the mirror image in that wedding picture. He said could only have been made with a camera lucida and so on and so forth. Other people dispute it. What do I know? But it was certainly available to these painters at that time. Creating the permanent image, and this is where we get the invention by committee, happens in a series of stages. In the early 18th century, Johann Schulze shows that you can make silver nitrate. It shows that certain chemicals are sensitive to light, will darken on exposure to light, but there's no way to stop the process. So it comes and it goes. Thomas Wedgwood, the son of the potter, did you talk about Wedgwood? The son of the potter, Wedgwood, you know is the name of a China company, is able to make images that last for a while on a leather that's impregnated with silver nitrate, but they fade and can't be fixed. Or do they? On the lower right, there's a picture of a leaf that was always attributed to Fox Talbot, one of the earlier inventors of photography, said to have been made around 1830. There's some evidence that appeared about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, that it may actually have been made by Wedgwood around 1790, which would make it the first photograph. And there's a dispute among scholars over this, and it's another one of these what do I know situations. But it's an interesting case. John Herschel, the son of Sir William Herschel, who discovered Neptune. He showed how sodium hyposulfate, hypo, could be used to fix an image. How many people here have made photographs with, like, in dark rooms, 1, 2, 3? Well, that's good. That's good. My daughter went off one summer into the course and doing that stuff and getting smelling, coming out smelling of hypo and so on. What I did when I was a kid. Right. So it's a name to conjure with, the Wedgwoods. And if you say he invented China, that's not as important to the pottery. That's not as important to the history of information. As I said, Nicephore Niepce, I think you say, makes the first heliograph on his window in Grasse. That's the place that's better known for the big perfume center of France. It was an 8-hour exposure, which is why the shadows are on both. Took an 8-hour exposure, which is why the shadows are on both sides. He collaborates with Daguerre. They come up with the daguerreotype, which is a way of making a print on glass. Fox Talbot. I'm going to go through this quickly because it's in the readings, and we're not interested in the techniques, the inventions as such, but in their implications. Fox Talbot, around the same time, invents what he calls photographic drawing. Again, photography is literally light writing. The light is doing the writing. The sun is the author of these images. This is a way of printing on paper and permits you to make multiple copies. The daguerreotype, you can only make one per exposure. And by the 1850s, you're getting new techniques, the collodion process, where you can make something like a modern transparent negative. That's the technique that people like Brady and others are going to be using during the Civil War, and it becomes the model of techniques that are used afterwards. The daguerreotype becomes briefly, not so briefly, but becomes when it first appears a sensation. Everybody has to go out and get his or her daguerreotype made to have it. It becomes for ordinary people a way of having a record of oneself. People who could never have had a portrait made of them can now go and get a daguerreotype made. And a record of family continuity. For the first time, you can see a picture of your parents when they were young, your grandparents, and so on. That sense of family and of personal connection becomes, if photography creates that later, when various methods of making paper prints were made available, they become one of the commodities that are most frequently sent by post. Once in the 1840s in America, postal rates dropped down. Originally, postal rates in the U.S. were set very high for personal letters. They were basically, the lower rates were for newspapers. It was basically thought of as a means of broadcasting news rather than personal information. That all changes in the 1840s. People are all of a sudden sending them to each other, not just letters, but photographs and seeds and recipes and all of these other things that enable them to keep in touch with one another. It becomes also an instrument of fame. For the first time, people can actually see representations, not just paintings or engravings, of these famous people. Not simply politicians, but the first stars in the modern sense, like Sarah Bernhardt, Rachel, the French actress who was another great star of this period, Jenny Lind, Tom Thumb, what do we say now, the small person, who was made famous by P.T. Barnum. The first beauty pageant is held in this period and involves, again, photographic distribution of the pictures. Some people are appalled by all this. Baudelaire, the French writer, writes that during this lamentable period, a new industry arose which contributed not a little to confirm stupidity in its faith and to ruin whatever might remain of the divine in the French mind. That's Baudelaire. The idolatrous mob demanded an ideal worthy of itself and appropriate to its nature in matters of painting and sculpture. The present-day credo of the sophisticated above all in France is, I believe that art is and cannot be other than the exact reproduction of nature. I'm going to come to that in a moment. Thus, an industry that could give us a result identical to nature would be the absolute of art. A revengeful God has given ear to the prayers of this multitude. Daguerre was his messiah. From that moment, our squalid society rushed Narcissus to a man to gaze at a trivial image on a scrap of metal. He was not generally positive about the technology. That's a fair conclusion. But the crucial point there is this idea of verisimilitude, that the highest object of art, Baudelaire charges the people with believing, is to exactly copy nature. And the photograph seems to many to be a technology capable of doing that. Daguerre himself said of photography, it's not merely an instrument which serves to draw nature. It gives her the opportunity to reproduce herself. Nature's talking, you just get out of the way. Edgar Allan Poe remarked that the daguerreotype plate is infinitely more accurate in its representation than any painting by human hands. If we examine a work of ordinary art, by means of a powerful microscope, all traces of resemblance will disappear. You walk up to the painting, it's just blobs of paint, Walk up to a photograph, and you just see more and more detail, a more accurate truth, as Poe says. As it happens in 1839, the same year Poe wrote that, Daguerre, making a series of photographs of Paris, is making a picture of the Rue de Dragon, and takes what happens to be the first candid photograph of a person. That little figure in the lower left, you can see it there more accurately. This figure shows up. Now, do you have an idea why only that figure might have showed up? Yeah. Right, well, that's right. It was 2 or 3 minute exposure, so people just walk right through it. And why was that figure stationary? He's getting his shoe shine. Yeah, he happened to stand for getting shoe shine and went down in immortality. So since none of us get our shoe shine anymore, that opportunity is lost to us. So there was this idea that the photograph gave us the world as it really was, without a faithful report, exactly without blemish. It cannot be disputed. This is a California newspaper writing about a 5-panel daguerreotype of San Francisco in 1851 that was shown in a gallery. After all, at this point, you couldn't see photographs in the newspaper magazines. There was no technology for reproducing photographs. You went to a gallery or a hall or somewhere you could see the exhibitions. There, people did that. And this was a daguerreotype that showed the San Francisco landscape. God himself gives us the evidence through the unerring light of the world's greatest luminary, the sun. It will tell its own story, and the sun will testify to its truth. This is this idea that suddenly appears, extraordinary idea that nature, having been interpreted, and meaning can be rendered by skilled artisans, and all of a sudden can speak for herself, I guess you'd say. It becomes, not surprisingly, the model for journalistic objectivity. The idea of what a newspaper should. Now, we will talk about this much more next time, and objectivity has a number of different sources. But our ideal of objectivity is, to a certain extent, shaped by the possibilities of the photograph.